One of the observations I made on a set that I was on recently was this philosophy that kind of circulated around, which was, and I quote, light spaces, not faces. And it's made me think a lot about priorities when lighting things, especially given that I'm working on lighting diagrams for stuff right now. And I'm trying to find a balance between lighting the space and lighting faces. And the DP, who was really, really good at what they were doing, mostly just lit the space and incidentally lit the face in a way. Like it was sort of I'm going to figure out how the space is going to be lit and colored. There was a lot of changing bulbs, a lot of putting small fixtures in different spots, a lot of LED strips, that kind of thing. And then as the shot was constructed, they'd walk behind the camera, look at the subject, and then say, I'd like a such and such here, key light. I think this person needs more fill light. I like such and such here, or to turn this light up. Sometimes it would involve a light that was being used on the space being turned up to create more like light on the face. And it was an approach that I'd literally never seen before. And I know that it's going to happen to me a lot because that's how going onto sets works. But it was like a 80%, I'm going to ignore that. It was an 80% emphasis on like the space.
I was thinking, but didn't actually say out loud.
I think we're in a safe space. You can say whatever you want.
How many approaches have you seen?
Not many. That's why I hadn't seen it. I'm fresh. I'm green. So I'm going to say that a lot nowadays. And be like, oh, wow, I've never seen this before. Never seen a tripod with a shoulder rig on it before. Wow.
Now what's that called again?
So anyway.
That one's worth memorizing. Shall we do it together?
Okay. Well, I can't do it with you. Just do it and then we'll pretend to do it together. What's
VCT?
VCT?
14.
14. VCT 14.
No, 14 as in the number that comes
VCT
after 13.
14, I see. Yeah. Okay.
I have no idea what it stands for.
Very cool tripod 14.
Possibly.
I saw an approach that was 80% focused on lighting the space and 20% focused on lighting the face. And I think you and we've spoken about shaping lights for a while and lighting hygiene for a while. And a lot of it has been focused with the set side management of light. That's kind of like, that is a sort of space focused thing. But I think we've mostly spoken about lighting the subject. It's made me think of a lot of questions for you, things about, if I do
what?
So it's a lead-on sentence. Hang on. There's a Gen Z moment right there. No. Huh? So if you do, how do you plan to light a space? Do you look at the practicals that are present? Do you think of putting practicals in there? Do you look at the corner of a room and say, I'd like that to be lit that way? Do you wait until you find out where the camera's going to be? Do you wait until you find out where the subjects are going to be? Do you look at blocking first? What's your approach to lighting a space? How much of a priority is it for you? There were so many questions in that question. I'm so sorry.
First of all, I don't think there is one size fits all. Everyone goes about it differently.
I did figure that was going to be the answer. Like there's no plain level of priority to lighting a space that fits everyone. But I just realized I haven't thought about it very much. So I'd just have to hear what your thoughts are.
For me, the first consideration is the feel. I think this is one of those things that very often gets underestimated, is to treat your location as a character, as an active kind of participant, as an active storyteller.
I like that.
I think at a certain point, if you don't do that, then why does location matter?
Yeah, wow.
So let me give you a couple of examples.
Mm-hmm.
Where would Blade Runner OG be without that particular version of Los Angeles?
That's true. Grimy and dark.
You could almost feel the breath and the heartbeat of the place itself, right? And sacrilege alert.
Don't say it. If this is about Blade Runner 2049, I'm not going to hear it. I'm not going to hear it.
I felt that the spaces felt more generic.
Okay, I think you're kind of right. Honestly, there is like slightly less texture, and I understand what you mean. I think 2049 has its own character. I don't think it's the same character.
It certainly has its own aesthetic in terms of the feeling of the space. I've got no problem going along with that. But if you change the feeling of the space, you're actually changing the story. I don't think it had that.
Oh, okay. Gotcha,
I think there are several elements of that feeling, the perception of the spaces that could change without significantly changing the impact of the story and the moment.
Right. It felt less like the space was like woven into the tapestry of the scene and the image and the feeling. And I can kind of, on like a really, we immediately started talking about Blade Runner, didn't we?
Give you another example.
I can kind of understand that. That makes sense. Sorry, go on.
What's the major difference between Alien and the subsequent
Aliens?
Any of them?
Well, this is a topic that I quite enjoy talking about, as a matter of fact. So you're going to get me going.
But think about like how much do you feel the Nostromo as a character?
So In my humble opinion, the Nostromo feels the most alive, almost like a living organism in the first one. It's wet and dripping and dark, and the light is hard. And in the second one, you're not on the Nostromo, but it has a...
There could be shots out of the abyss that you could drop straight into Aliens.
Yeah, and the Aliens fits the kind of James Cameron look. It's got the slightly more colorful appearance. I think everything looks a bit bigger, like it's less claustrophobic. Alien 3, a good movie, has sorry, I like to hit with that one when it's my fun opinion. Kind of, in my opinion, has a similar vibe to 2049, like Blade Runner 2049. Has a kind of a brutalist approach that I quite like. Now, let's skip over the bad one and get straight to Prometheus. I have a real problem with the difference between Prometheus and Alien Covenant. By the way, if I start talking about this too long,
no Covenant.
You're free to shut me up, by the way, if I'm losing track too hard. So just like ring a bell or something.
To me, the spaces in Prometheus feel more
stagey. Yeah,
generic. As in, what's the big interior in Prometheus?
The derelict? Is it the huge?
Yeah.
It's the same interior as the one from Alien, but it looks a bit different.
But that's what I'm saying. Like the actual feeling of it. The interior of the derelict. What's the episode 7 Star Wars again?
Force Awakens.
Yeah.
Prometheus looks like The Force Awakens.
Yeah, when Kylo Ren meets the whatever reincarnation of the Emperor. That space feels very much like the sense of that space of the derelict in Prometheus.
I'm so sorry, but it's related to what we're talking about. So Prometheus and Alien Covenant, which I realize you haven't seen, share a DP. I forget who it is. It's Ridley Scott's, the one he carries around in his pocket, the cool one, who everyone loves. He did House of Gucci as well, and I think Gladiator.
No, not Gladiator.
Not Gladiator?
Gladiator was John Matheson. Prometheus was Darius Wolski.
Yes, him. So he did Alien Covenant as well. And those two movies have...
a couple of the pirates as well, I believe.
He did a few of the pirates. I swear he did House of Gucci as well.
I think he may have done Dark City.
I wouldn't be surprised. Hang on. Same DP, look completely different. Prometheus and Alien Covenant both have the derelict in them, shot in completely different ways. Alien Covenant is deliberately a lot closer to the original Alien, and it feels better. Alien Covenant visually, its appearance feels more organic and, like I said earlier, kind of woven into the tone of the movie.
If we are going to continue on with that, I think definitely Psycho.
Oh.
Like the Overlook Motel. It's a presence. You feel the space, right? Let's think of other examples. Do you know The Orphanage? Kind of horror thriller?
It's gone with the how old is that?
2008 or something along those lines.
Never mind. Okay. I thought it was the one with the kids with the nothing eyes.
Yeah, there are kids. Well, The Orphanage.
Well,
so it's
I realize it doesn't narrow it down.
The Spanish, so I believe that's like 2008-ish.
2007 Spanish film?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I'm telling porkies. I was thinking the right word. I was saying the wrong movie. Did you notice I was saying The Overlook Motel? I meant The Overlook Hotel from...
The Shining?
Yes, The Shining. As in that has character, like the spaces are characters, aren't they?
Like the whole thing feels like a gaping maw the whole time, the way that it's shot.
Also the motel in, or I should say the Bates' residence more so than the actual hotel, I should say, in Psycho. And like another one where it's maybe a little bit more subtle, but Children of Men, there's a very distinct feel to all the spaces.
I've not seen Children of Men, but if it's anything else like...
Chivo.
It's Chivo?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know he and... Have Alfonso Cuarón and he worked together before, or is it just Children of Men?
No, they worked together in Mexico. So I might just keep kind of throwing some examples because part of what I want to do is the feeling is very distinct in all the examples I'm throwing, but the techniques and the aesthetic of how it's done is very different. 1984 has a very distinct sense of space.
They have similar aesthetics. You could kind of, if you're talking about the way you use space tonally and the way that you shoot space tonally, I think that 1984 and Brazil are a good comparison.
Yeah.
Because they both have they have a different tone, but they're very similar art direction.
That sense a little further. 12 Monkeys as well. More recent examples, there are elements of Oblivion. I'm not sure what that's with the AI assistant that almost gives this like pristine spaces almost their own. I don't know about you, but you kind of, for me, I kind of feel that presence in those spaces.
I haven't seen Oblivion.
Really works kind of a bit oddly because they are very kind of futuristic clinical spaces in terms of mise en scène.
It's got that kind of sci-fi minimalist look that's really popular now. I have not seen it. It's a Joseph Kosinski who
Claudio
did
Miranda,
Top Gun Maverick.
Tarkovsky, Solaris, and Stalker.
Mm.
Like the spaces really are characters. In the case of
Yeah.
Solaris, you're gonna have to make it that, and I think it's really interesting to see the difference between Tarkovsky's
And the
Solaris and what's his
Soderbergh
name,
one?
Soderbergh's. Yeah.
Soderbergh Solaris can be compared quite nicely to Sunshine, I think, in the way that they shoot the interior of a spaceship.
I disagree.
You think? No,
Yes.
not like similar, but like as a case study. How so? Why not?
I can't put my finger on it. I'd have to go back and review.
Okay, I'll have a scroll through still images of both of them and see if I feel that way anymore.
THX 1138, space is very much present there. And then what I think of as the spiritual remake, although it's not a technical remake.
You can do it. I believe in you.
But Ewan McGregor and Scarlett Johansson.
Who directed it?
I want to say Michael Bay, but I don't think it's Michael Bay.
It's not The Island, is it?
Yeah, The Island.
That's Michael Bay.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think spiritually that's like as close as you can get to a remake of THX 1138 without it being a remake. So, how do you want the space to feel? Also, how believable or how stylistic do you want the space to appear? Lighting to tell a story, to express a point of view, to express an opinion. There is a big element of Gestalt law in it.
Got to think Gestalt. I'm so excited. Go on.
So particularly the law of closure. Do you remember kind of roughly the 6 laws of Gestalt?
Not off by heart. Whenever I think of it, all I can think about is those loose lines that kind of look like a shape, but technically aren't a shape, and things like the absence of something being something, even though it's the absence of something.
If I do this, what do you see?
Circle, but there isn't a circle there.
Exactly. There is that much of a gap, right? In terms of like visual storytelling for me, don't show everything, but put things close enough together that subconsciously the viewers connect the dots.
Yeah.
Part of where you start here is, what do I want to hide? If I'm not going to show everything, so rather than start thinking about what do I want to show, start thinking about what do you not want to show.
So you have your space, you've got your location, potentially you have your blocking. You sit down in front of your computer, have all your references in your head, and the first question is, what do I want to hide with my lighting? What do I not want to be seen?
Yeah, that's one part of it. I think of deep shadows, tenebrism. The deeper the shadow, the deeper the mirror for the viewer. Like that really deep shadow that's not giving you anything. Gestalt, does the viewer's brain do? Start filling in. What could be there.
I have 3 things to say to that. Number 1, Ari Aster, who I realize you haven't seen any of. Yeah, the way that he uses shadow in Hereditary is absurd. It's ridiculous. There are some wide shots in that film where large portions of the screen are obscured in shadow. You think until you look, and they aren't, and it's terrible. Number 2, Lake Mungo. One of my favorite movies of all time. I've probably mentioned it at least once before.
What do you do to Hatman?
He's just hanging out. If you look hard enough, the Hatman will actually just appear.
Okay.
Anyway, Lake Mungo actively uses the loss of resolution as you zoom into images to trick you into thinking something is there, or to barely show you something is there. There are so many moments in that film. It's a mockumentary about a dead girl and haunting a house. That's the premise. It's a lot more than that, but that's it, basically. And there are so many moments where it shows you an image and slowly zooms into the darkest part of the image, and the faintest silhouette of a human being is there, and it makes you feel like peeling your skin off. It's excellent. Number 3, on the other end of the high and low culture spectrum, there are a few memes out there that I've encountered. Obviously, they're mostly viewed on your phone, which is a black piece of reflective material when it's not in use or when there's no lights activated, that don't display any video and cut to a black screen and linger on it so you can look at your own reflection while you're looking at your phone. And it's so funny and so effective. It's just confronting you with the fact that you're staring at this thing and you see your own face and you normally look like this. You're like, and it's excellent. Like, it just gets you every time.
The tricky part is in the balance, because you got to weigh that against how believable do you want this space to feel. So I think if you go too overtly tenebrism a la Caravaggio, then that is a certain style. As in, if you go into your uncle's living room, does it look like a Caravaggio painting.
Yeah, no, you'd hope not. It's
Everything kind of bleeds into the shadows, and the shadows are so deep and so dense that you don't know whether you've walked into outer space.
And that's like the tone question, because if you're making a realistic horror film, you might not want that, but if you're making an impressionist horror film, you might.
Very often, it seems like it is something that a lot of beginners and students get drawn to because they're not used to thinking in that way.
What do you mean?
Am I right in saying that? As in,
how?
like when we first started out making movies, the bigger thoughts are like, what do we put in the frame as opposed to
what do we take out? Yeah, I mean,
am I right in saying that?
I think it's a part of developing it's a part of kind of thinking of the frame as like an image instead of a collection of the things that are in front of the camera, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so more as
and that's something I still struggle with a lot.
Image making versus
documenting.
Reality capture? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I'm pretty stuck in the reality capture thing. I'm always worrying about what's like outside of the bounds of the frame still. I think it takes a lot of mental work and also expertise and also shooting stuff to kind of get to the image making part of the process.
My goodness. Left-handed trackpadding is just awkward, isn't it?
It's anything with the left hand.
Well, I was trying not to be judgmental.
You're among right-handed people here.
So, like that.
Oh, wow.
So, Harry Callahan here has got a lot of street photography like this. So dark, Tenebrism, that it really almost feels like this could just be some spaceship lost in outer space. I think most image makers find it really fascinating and rewarding and stimulating to try and create in that kind of Tenebrism style.
Yeah.
But just be mindful that if that's all you can do, then there are certain styles and moods and tones that's going to be very difficult to pull off.
You gave us an assignment to replicate a certain style, and I think I did Tenebrism, and we made a fantastic image with it, a great image. I was very happy with it. It was creepy as shit. It was wonderful. Hard to find it.
I think you do lose some three-dimensionality.
Right.
So I think a big part of the challenge is still have some of that mindset, as in still leave some shadows, but not necessarily having them be completely dense, deep. If we purely think about like our creative, emotional, narrative intention, then don't underestimate the sense of space that fall off and the inverse square law can generate.
All right.
Do you want to try and think about that one for a moment?
I would like you to elaborate. I'm just thinking about how does fall off create a sense of space?
It tells us how close we are to the light source, right?
Right. Yeah. Okay.
And particularly with overhead toppy sources, if the light source feels like it's right there, it feels like a much lower ceiling.
Okay. So the space doesn't feel as big. Excellent. All right. This leads me to my next of many questions, which I'm sure have been incidentally answered in a number of ways. And there's a fun final question. It's a lot more vague and philosophical. Mentally, my brain has like lighting the space and lighting the face as two separate things, but I'm completely aware those things overlap like a lot. But obviously, you don't want to just light people with practicals because then you have less control over how their face looks, which is very, very important. How much separation between lighting your subject and lighting your space do you think is necessary? Or do you think it's, again, a question of what you're trying to achieve? Maybe if you're going for a kind of naturalistic look, you might be into just focusing on lighting the space and then seeing how that light lands incidentally on your subject. Or if you're going for a slightly more heightened look, you might want, light on your subject that doesn't match with the light in the space. What does this make you think about? These aren't questions more as they are just like things to jog your mind, because the answer to them is going to be something like it depends.
And also it's personal.
Yeah. Like again, on the set that I was on recently, a bunch of small sources and fixtures placed around the space, then looking at where the subject was standing and then thinking, okay, I want this there and this there, or nothing at all.
Personally, a bit hesitant about lighting only with practicals. The main reason for that is that in order to get them to expose the face well enough, it usually makes them burn out as a blowout.
Figured as much.
And that's a very particular look. I'm not sure the average audience would really pay that much attention, but to me, it just looks like you've let those practicals blow out. And to me, that makes it look like I'm watching someone else's recording. I'm watching through someone else's camera. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I might elaborate this in a community post, but this sounds to me a lot like the mid-2000s Doctor Who look.
Not that familiar with that.
Hence, yeah.
If I was going to give two examples, Eyes Wide Shut.
Oh, okay.
Which was primarily lit through practicals.
Stanley Kubrick quite liked that, didn't he? Hence Barry Lyndon. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm seeing it.
All the practicals there are just really, really blown out.
Yeah, there's a shot I'm looking at right here where there's a lot of Christmas lights and bulbs on each table. They're all
and it's just like
white.
Nuclear white.
Yeah.
No texture, no color. Early Steven Soderbergh when he made the transition to shooting as well as directing. So I'm kind of looking at everything there from about, certainly the first Ocean was very much about like trying to use practicals a lot and let things go and get really hot.
Yep, I'm seeing that.
Again, to me, that makes me aware that I'm looking through someone else's camera.
Right.
So for me, I tend to want to augment practicals so that I'll keep the texture and color in the practicals.
This leads me on to my next question. It's actually perfectly related to it. I realize this is normal practice, augmenting practicals, putting different bulbs in them with different temperatures and everything. How do you make the most out of practicals? How much effort should we put into making them look good before we just kind of get rid of them? If they add to the texture of the room, then we may as well keep them around, get different bulbs, make them different colors. Get those fancy bulbs that you can change the color of using a wireless app?
It's more of a philosophical approach question. I think, do you want the practicals to actually illuminate? Or do you just want to use them for motivation?
I'm more inclined to use things like that for motivation. A few things that I've planned, not shot, so I guess we'll find out, have a practical in the background. And whenever that's visible, it's just the practical. And then when you reverse it, there's a light that's the same temperature as the practical, motivated by the practical. Not the the practical itself isn't illuminating. I feel like I have more control that way.
Yeah, and I feel for me, using practicals for lighting, 9 times out of 10, they are much harder than I prefer my lighting to be.
Okay.
Depending on the type of practical as well. Like at a certain point, particularly if you look at something with lampshade, it's going to take on the color and appearance of the lampshade. But at a certain point, then it becomes, how much can you actually change the color?
Like you put you think to yourself, I want this practical to be green, and the practical is a lamp with a lampshade, and you put a green bulb in there, but it comes through the yellow lampshade as orange or something like that. Like it's a...
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Yeah, that was some terrible color theory, by the way. Please don't pick that apart.
I'm in two minds about the whole app thing. I can see the benefit, but I can also see it becoming like very much a time concept.
Too much choice.
Yeah. We used to have a couple of different ways of approaching the dreaded like blowout of a practical. Roscoe Scrim or Lee Scrim. This is a ginormous roll of it. So generally what I do with this is cut this down into like little pieces. So can you see?
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah, you brought that closer. I thought it was
That's the silver side.
That's cool.
And that's the black side.
Wow.
So for controlling just the burnout, but still have the globe being able to illuminate what's behind the practical, I would probably put the black side of the screen to the camera.
Oh, okay.
And the silver side to the globe. So a big portion of the light coming from the globe would be reflected back to the background. And so the actual globe inside would be... So I'll cut these into like maybe, I don't know, 10 centimeter by 10 centimeter. So you can see I can control a few practicals. We used to cut out little bits of that and stick inside the glass cover of headlamps on cars, for example, just so that the globe itself didn't completely blow out.
So it sort of evens out the light spread.
It used to be that with incandescent globes, that stuff would melt. You'd need to keep a lot more space, but with LEDs, you can almost tape it straight on the globe itself.
Wow.
Another one, again, this is a lot more feasible with LEDs than with the old incandescents. Just take a black Sharpie and cover the side that's looking into camera.
You can wipe it off though, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. That was my primary source of confusion. Okay.
There are all sorts of little
tricks.
Let's say like you really wanted the practical to light the space.
Yeah.
Right? Now, if you dim the whole globe so that the front side facing the camera isn't blowing out, you're also dimming everything behind there. So it's not lighting as much of the space.
do you think there's a zeitgeist right now, or like what the zeitgeist is in terms of lighting spaces? Do you think it's changed? Do you think, where was it in the past?
I think if we are going by our fellow YouTubers in that space, there's definitely a move away from lighting spaces.
Really?
And I think a lot of it is due to the solo operator nature of a lot of YouTube content creators. In order to light space, do you think a lot of the YouTube filmmaking space is going to spend a lot of time and effort on buying the practicals, buying the globes for the practicals, controlling the practicals? With that also comes, because you're lighting more of the space, you probably also need to pay more attention to mise-en-scène.
Probably not. I think there's definitely like a quick and easy focus. You know, there's like a...
Yeah, I see a lot of Tenebrism in a way that to me does not look believable.
Right.
Again, it makes me aware that I'm looking through someone else's camera.
Right.
How much the shadows fall off,
okay,
and how much Tenebrism there is, how little separation there is. It's very Caravaggio.
Especially in the thumbnails.
Yep.
The fall off is quite fast.
Which
like,
means,
very,
again,
very
that the sources are close in.
Yeah, so there are a few images got like a toppy warm light coming that's kind of in the foreground of the image, and the background has, I think it's meant to be a door. It's nighttime, I think. It's open. Background is a cold light coming in from the side, but both of them are really hard. Like, it isn't like a row of shelves that I'm seeing. It's shelf, shadow, shelf, shadow, shelf, shadow, shelf, shadow.
I'm wondering whether the drive to smaller crews is driving the schedules down, and whether those two things in combination make it easier to skip lighting the space, because it does a lot with student work as well.
I'm going to admit to you that I straight up just didn't. First off, the crews were quite small on the student sets, which I could have easily fixed. Having a lighting guy is generally the fix to that. Lighting person is generally the fix to that. There's a lighting person there's a specific lighting person on the set that I was on the other week, and it was so great. It was excellent. I don't know why my stupid little brain didn't think, oh, I should just get one of my friends from uni to do lighting on my short. So I have someone to say, please put set up a 2-to-1 with like 2 Fresnels, please pop it over there. Like, it's just makes me mad. See, it wasn't even in my head. That's the thing. There was no particular like, oh, we should do this quickly or with only one person. It just wasn't in my brain, which is probably a result of a lot of tutorials by people who are focusing on doing it quickly with very few people.
Or, just being able to do it at all with only one person. If you're in it yourself, then I think it's fair that you only have so much patience in terms of tweaking and adjusting the setup.
And I've done obviously a lot of stuff on my like Instagram account that's just me, but I also don't think there's much I can do more than what I've done without like a large team and like lots of time.
There are 2 challenges that I think are worth pursuing, both in actual practice and also a little bit of a mindset switch, philosophical.
Ooh.
First of all, light for depth and try to make use the principles of atmospheric perspective. So the way atmospheric perspective works is brighter, hazier, cooler, appears further away.
I haven't shot enough wides in natural settings, but I have considered the idea of being like a fog machine or something for the background, like the background, like quite far away.
But first of all, get away from the flat wall.
I think I've been getting better at that personally in my practice.
Look for other rooms, look for doors, windows. Can you extend the sense of the space beyond the actual physical boundaries? So let's say that you can put a doorway in the background, try to light the most distant parts brighter, light everything gradually darker as it physically is closer to the camera. So that would mean if I'm lighting something with a doorway, then as far back in the hallway there as I can get, I'm going to put my brightest source.
That's something I can try at home. I mean, it's best if I do it on like a set, but that's definitely something I can have because I've got plenty of doorways.
Yep. And secondly, I would try the exercise of rather than lighting front to back light, try some exercises with lighting back to front.
So instead of going, how am I going to light the subject, and then how am I going to light the background, I think to myself, how am I lighting the background? Then how am I lighting the subject?
Literally think like, what's the furthest thing away in my setup? And start there, lighting that, work your way towards the camera. Where I think you're going to find the biggest challenges often in lighting the space is rigging.
Yeah. So, no, I decided that question wasn't worth asking, actually. Never mind.
That's often where practicals do a job.
Yeah, I was about to say, actually, yeah, it's probably worth asking. I was about to say, I get the impression that a lot of lighting this space is a lot of practicals. And I've never thought to myself about like things like diffuse ratio and fall off in terms outside of someone's face, if that makes sense. Like thinking about that kind of thing in terms of the space, like what's the fall off of the shadow of this bedside table onto the wall, is not something I think about most of the time. I'm normally thinking about what does the light look like on the camera? What kind of light does it cast on the wall? What color is it? That kind of thing.
Yeah, I think a lot of the time it also is connected to your depth of field. So how blurry are your backgrounds going to read? Start thinking about the emotional continuity of the space more than the geographical continuity of the space.
Oh, okay.
Very often, in order to avoid something like a background wall feeling too flat, we try and shape the source so that you get a gradient or a cone, some kind of vignette of light on the wall, right? So the top corners fade off. Right? Now, very often what happens then is that you move in for the close-up, and if you're not changing the background lighting,
it's flat again.
Suddenly, corner to corner is brightly lit.
Yeah. So you'd suggest in this hypothetical scenario that you make the cone smaller.
Yeah.
Okay. Right.
And I think a good way of starting to catch that is to watch a lot of your images as really small thumbnails. Because then you don't see the detail, you don't get hung up in the detail, but you see the broad strokes. Like if you see kind of roughly that kind of tent shape vignette in a lot of your thumbnails, but then suddenly one is just bright, whatever corner to corner, whatever color the wall is, then you know that one feels like a slightly different space.
This has got me thinking, which is good, because the next thing I'm shooting is is mostly shot against a white wall with flat light, and I've had absolutely no idea how to approach making it look interesting.
First trick for that is distance. Move the subject away.
Okay.
Where do most people have their couch and their TVs in their living rooms?
Up against the wall.
How often do you actually see that in movies and TV shows?
Rarely, because it doesn't look good. Right. Okay. Yes. All right. I'll keep them distant from the wall.
Lounges, those kind of things. A lot of the time at home, we have them up against the wall to maximize our floor space. But that also means that it's much, much, much more difficult to avoid the flat wall. Because when you light the person, it's almost impossible to not light the wall behind them as well at the same time.
Okay. So, as usual, I bombarded you with a number of questions. It seems to me, on my question of planning, it's all just in the intent. All of the examples you provided are very, very interesting to me, especially the alien ones. Prometheus and the original Alien shooting the same set, for example, and it looking completely different is a very good example of like the intent, or just in Prometheus's case, probably like not the perfect execution of intent, if that makes sense. Planning is all about intent, including and not limited to how much do you not want to show of the space. I love that question. That's so cool. I'm a very big fan of that, but I'm also not too big of a fan to fall off the wagon and just end up doing Tenebrism the whole time, which isn't going to happen.
But for certain types of stories, certain types of projects, then it's good to have that technique, that approach, that mindset up your sleeve.
Yeah. In further discussions, I mentioned the overlap between lighting a space and like the subject, which frankly just is more about practicals. The idea of not letting your practicals get blown out, a few little techniques that you can do about that, whether or not you should be using practicals to illuminate your subjects or not, probably not. They don't really do much illuminating. If they do illuminate, they're normally blown out. Be careful.
I will say to that this is personal preference.
Personal preference, yeah.
If you like the way it looks with only using practicals, then by all means go for it. However, I would advise trying to do a test so that you're not tied to the idea of this the knowledge that this was just shot with available fixtures on the day. Does that kind of proviso make sense?
Yes. Yeah, it does.
Because I think for some people, like less manipulation equals automatically better in terms of storytelling, like more true, which again, if that's how you personally feel about filmmaking, then absolutely go with that. But I would say in an ideal world, try not to make that decision until you've tried both ways, if that makes sense. And I think a way to do that is to do blind tests, as in have someone else set up a similar staging, composition, pose, one lit purely with practicals as is, and one lit with more controlled sources, but motivated by the practical, and where the person viewing it don't know which is which, and then decide. Because then I think it is truly your choice, as opposed to going, I like what filmmaker XYZ does and they always do whatever, so that's what I'm going to do as well.
And then we moved on to kind of the zeitgeist, the
YouTube bashing.
Try to get a gradient on the white background that you're shooting this month, and also maybe put the subjects a bit further away from it if you can. But also the room is really small. We shall see. We shall see.
That for me is another one where the location, it's worth fighting for a bigger space.
Yeah.
It's always possible to make a bigger space feel smaller.
You can't.
There's only so much you can do with a smaller space.
It's like adding salt to a dish.
There's only so much bigger you can make a space feel.
You can add salt past the water, but you can't take it out.
What were the two exercises that we ended up with?
I'm happy with this. I think is it okay if I combine them into one?
Yeah, I guess.
Excellent. So what I need to do is I need to find a kind of longish space for the doorway that's visible. Light whatever's at the end of that doorway the brightest. And think about that.
Furthest distance, brighter.
And think about that first. Construct my image
Back
and
to
then
front.
think about lighting it back to front. So I'll figure out where I'm going to shoot from, where I'm going to put the subject, and how I'm going to light it back to front. I'm going to think not how I'm going to light myself, but instead how I'm going to light the thing that's furthest away, which means that the thing that's furthest away might end up being lucky enough to get an actual fixture in it or not. That or I'll just turn a lamp on, but I might not be able to turn a lamp on because it won't be the brightest thing in the image. I need the back part of it to be the brightest part of the image, which means I want a fixture that can be very, very bright, of which I only have one. So I'll figure that out within the week. I'll figure that out by the 14th. The 14th, fam. Excellent. I'm excited.
I think also you may notice that Ethan has acquired a bit more color.
What can I say? It's a brighter world.
I want this on record. We are still wanting to try and guide Ethan to proper de-logging of his cine style.
Yeah.
So part of the color for the moment is that for the moment he has abandoned cine style. Am I right in saying that?
Well, I wasn't on cine style whenever we recorded. So I was on portrait mode when we recorded together. But I would capture my exercises in cine style and then pop it through Darktable. And it would do the automatic Darktable stuff. And I'd be like, that looks great. And then put it on Instagram. And then, when we were recording, maybe, he was just like, you aren't de-logging it. My whole life fell apart in front of my eyes.
There has been some progress. Ethan is starting to understand maybe a little bit more about what we mean by de-logging.
There's a LUT involved. Cinestyle de-logging LUT dot whatever file format LUTs come in, please download, free download .rus.
Do you want the cheat that they give me, the easy?
Well, I mean, is it good?
Whatever file you download, the CineStyle picture profile, the zip folder, might just have a LUT folder too.
Oh, this is a twist. I'm going to have a look. Hang on. Let me see if it's in my downloads folder still.
And this is a lesson in don't delete the download.
Okay, let's have a look. Cinestyle. Yep, Technicolor _Cinestyle _v1.zip. Let's have a look. It contains a Cinestyle.zip, S-curve for Cinestyle.mga, which I just realized how close I was to the camera just then. I've been neglecting it. So I'm going to assume the file that says Cinestyle.mga is the one that I should have been using. I wonder, S-curve, it's the S-curve.
You may need a little more research into LUT formats.
Sounds like it. Great. I'll have that figured out by the 14th as well. You know what? I'm going to properly de-log my next exercise. How about that?
Sounds good, because I think you may find that it affects your exposure latitude.
Oh, really? De-log exercise properly. All right. Fantastic.
We're lit?
I think we are.
Then let's shoot.
Surrounded.
See you later.